Hey, you there, are you a basic little bitch? Do you get confused when your cinephile friends say scary things like Italian neorealism and German expressionist? Well, sit your fat ass down and allow me, someone who hasn't watched Citizen Kane, to teach you a thing or two about film history in Film History for Idiots. For my very first episode of Film History for Idiots, we'll be discussing the insanely influential French film Breathless. Now, I've had this episode planned for a very long time, but it turns out I'm somehow late to the party for explaining Breathless to normies, because there was a biopic recently released in 2025 about the entire production of this film. It's called Nouvelle Vague, and it was directed by Richard Linklater, who is a very well-respected filmmaker, most notably for the Before trilogy. Now, you might be asking yourself, hey, Venus Keltic, why would I watch this video explaining Breathless when I can watch a far more expensive and technically impressive film do the exact same thing? Well, to that I say, did you watch Nouvelle Vague? Did anyone watch Nouvelle Vague? I might be the only one who did, and I can safely say that you aren't missing out on anything if you haven't watched it yet, as it was very boring and safe without saying anything really interesting. This video, however, will at least try to be more engaging and explain why people love Breathless, or at the very least love talking about it. Firstly, let's do a quick lesson on the history of this movie. Breathless, or its original French title, A Bout de Souffle, is a 1960 French film directed by the legendary filmmaker Jean-Luc Godard. If you're a casual moviegoer or someone who just prefers more modern cinema, that may not mean much to you, but I assure you, his impact on cinema was literally revolutionary. Even if you aren't inspired by Godard, your favorite directors like Martin Scorsese, Wong Kar-wai, and unfortunately, even Quentin Tarantino are just some of the countless filmmakers who were inspired by him. If you're a hip-hop fan, then you could say that Godard is the MF Doom of cinema, and your favorite director's favorite director, or what have you. But why is that? Well, there are many reasons, but for this video, let's just stick to what applies to Breathless. One of the most inspiring things about Godard was that he was originally just a film critic before he decided to make movies himself. You see, Godard was a part of the very famous French magazine Cahiers du Cinéma, which is a film magazine that's most well known for two things. One was inventing auteur theory, which I don't have enough time to explain right now, but to put it simply is the idea that the director is the most important part of a movie and their collective filmography is the quote-unquote true art. The second and more relevant point was that a ton of famous French filmmakers were originally just critics who wrote for Cahiers, such as Francois Truffaut, Claude Chabrol, and obviously Jean-Luc Godard. Now, Godard loved cinema with a passion and saw the medium as true art, but he thought most of the movies made around that time were kind of ass. He thought Hollywood was too strict and limited what their own films could and couldn't do, as well as just being kind of safe and generic, just like a factory mass-producing the same old product over and over again. Godard didn't stand for any of this, however, and decided that he was going to make a movie with real personality and break all the conventional rules of filmmaking just to prove that it could work. On top of that, he would prove that he could make this unconventional film with a fraction of the budget that these big Hollywood studios have. If you want a modern comparison to this story, think of Chris Stuckman, but you know, if he was actually talented and didn't promote gambling.
Whether you're on Grand and Green or Defy Gravity, the visuals feel cinematic, and you really do feel like a high roller while spinning across all those machines.
Anyways, Godard would go on to make his directorial debut, where he would have a dumpster fire of a production that everyone except himself would hate, and the end product was Breathless, the original topic of this episode. Premiering in France on March 16, 1960, the film would gain massive critical acclaim, as people loved his creative style that the younger generation could more easily relate to. The film was also a huge commercial hit and would cement Godard as a worthy filmmaker and one of the few critics who could put his money where his mouth is. But enough about Godard. Let's finally talk about the movie itself and why people love this stupid little movie so much. Breathless is a movie about many things, with themes and characters. You can quote me on that. No, but seriously, the reason why I speak so broadly about Breathless is because it's truly just a mix of everything. It's part crime and thriller, with romance, drama, comedy.
Hélas, hélas, hélas. J'aime une fille qui a une très jolie nuque, de très jolis seins, une très jolie voix, de très jolis poignets, un très joli front, de très jolis genoux. Mais qui est
and it feels like it's really above being called any singular genre. That's how you know a French person made it. For a very brief plot synopsis, Breathless revolves around a self-proclaimed asshole and car thief, Michel Picard, who kills a policeman in the heat of the moment. As Michel becomes a wanted fugitive throughout France, he tries to convince his old American girlfriend, Patricia Francini, to run away with him to Italy. The funny thing about that basic description is that I am 100% correct in what I just said, but it's also not really what the movie is, quote-unquote, about. If you've seen the movie before, maybe you'd agree in my belief that it's not really really about the crimes in it. Michel murders a police officer in like the opening scene of the film, and anyone he karate chops or police he runs away from are really just in the background of this film. To me at least, I feel like the crime and action in this movie is just a hook for the audience so we can be more engaged with Michel and Patricia's relationship, which is clearly the focal point of the film. Michel, played by the charismatic Jean-Paul Belmondo, and Patricia, played by the astonishingly beautiful Jean Seberg, are very conflicting and opposite characters who just have tremendous chemistry together. Michel is a cynical and misogynistic dork who tries to impersonate the badass and confident characters of Humphrey Bogart, while failing to realize that Bogart is just an actor who specialized in fiction. On the other hand, you have Patricia, a young American woman who travels abroad to France to pursue her career in journalism. In my opinion, she is a far more complicated and interesting character, as the film tries to portray her as kind of an airhead or carefree woman, while still at the same time showing that she is far more independent and self-reliant than Michel, and is truly passionate about her career in journalism compared to Michel's impulsive crimes. Most of the film is just the two of them talking to each other, or more accurately, at each other. See, one thing I've noticed with all of Godard's films is that he writes his dialogue exactly like you think a pretentious film critic would. It's fast, it's witty, it's philosophical at times, and comprehensible at others.
Quelle est votre plus grande ambition dans la vie?
Jusqu'au devenir immortel, et puis mourir.
Some would argue that the film is full of itself, but I would personally disagree. I think the dialogue is like a stroke of paint on a massive canvas. It may seem quick and meaningless at first, but when you look at the full picture, you can notice the real sincerity and cohesion of it all. A funny thing worth noting is that the script was mostly improvised and written on a day-to-day basis, which I think is incredibly impulsive, but not lazy, and I definitely think that it can all be tied seamlessly with good directing and some time in the editing room. Speaking of editing, however, let's talk about what Breathless is most famous for: jump cuts. Now, if you don't know what a jump cut is, allow me to show an example from something I personally made.
In today's video, we're gonna be doing a satanic ritual. Satan.
I should make it clear that it's not about being half naked and retarded, but the use of cutting shots to intentionally avoid continuity. You basically cut your shots together while jumping across space and time to give it a unique style that's exclusive to film as a medium. For the longest time, jump cuts were never intentionally done, except for some old silent films that used them for special effects, like making it look like a woman's head was being decapitated. Breathless, on the other hand, was the first film to use jump cuts intentionally because, well, fuck it, it looks cool. And also because the rough cut was too long, but who cares? It looks cool. I do truly believe that the jump cuts dramatically enhance the film and add to the chaotic and sort of surrealist portrayal of a world very grounded in reality. But besides that, what else is there to talk about besides the fun dialogue and crazy editing style? Well, I suppose there is the iconic ending we could discuss, but I also don't want to spoil a film from 66 years ago, so I'll try to be vague. Nouvelle vague. That was the movie. Richard Linklater. The one I mentioned earlier by Richard Linklater. Okay. The film has a pretty iconic ending, to say the least. Like the rest of the screenplay, it's very French and abstract. We get to see the final result of Michel and Patricia's relationship, for however fake or real it is to them, and see the price you have to pay. Michel has the second funniest last line by a Belmondo character in a Godard film, and Patricia ends the film on such an ironic but powerful note that always gets a chuckle out of me, whether it was intentional or not. Anyways, that's about it for the plot. I could overanalyze it to hell and try to explain why every line proves this movie is amazing, but this series isn't film history for smart people, so I'll leave that up to the scholars with too much free time. Something much more fun I can do, however, is teach you, my dear idiots, basic film trivia from IMDb and other websites, so you can finally feel smart when watching this movie with your friends. 1. Fellow Cahiers du Cinéma writer and already established French filmmaker Francois Truffaut was the one who came up with the story of Breathless. He wrote the original treatment, or in other words a summary of the movie, and an outline for it in collaboration with Claude Chabrol. Truffaut decided to pass on the film and instead gave it to Godard, who decided to write the actual script day by day as previously mentioned. He also changed the ending drastically to what Truffaut had envisioned, to which Truffaut said, and I quote, "Jean-Luc chose a violent end, because he was by nature sadder than I." 2. Breathless was based on a true story. Truffaut read a newspaper article in 1952 about a car thief named Michel Porteo, who also killed a cop and had an American girlfriend. I don't know why either Truffaut or Godard found the story so interesting on a surface level, but hey, all I seem to see is sex and violence on TV, so maybe it's just an easy pitch. 3. Godard and his producer, Georges de Beauregard, kinda hated each other. George was completely in the right, however, as Godard would stop filming way too early in the day because he ran ran out of ideas, and again, didn't have a completed script, which added a lot of tension. The worst of it culminated when Godard called George and lied that he was sick from eating bad food and had to cancel filming that day. That lie didn't work, however, because George saw Godard perfectly fine in a cafe and was so pissed the two literally started fistfighting each other until some bystanders broke them up. 4. Many of the scenes in Breathless take place in the busy and crowded streets of Paris. Usually, you would need to get a film permit if you want to do that, but Godard couldn't because you needed a complete fucking script if you wanted a permit. To get around this, Godard used two main methods. One was to make a completely fake script written by an assistant so they could get the permit that way. The second was to ignore the permit entirely and just place the camera in a delivery cart and cut a hole in it for the lens. This sort of guerrilla style filmmaking is also why you can see some funny reactions of pedestrians in the background. 5. Lastly, in the film, there's a scene where Michel takes on the alias of Laszlo Kovacs.
Je téléphone de la part de Tony, de Marseille. Laszlo Kovacs. Je lui amène une américaine.
This is a reference to a film released a year prior, Web of Passion, where Michel's actor plays the character Laszlo Kovacs. Web of Passion was also made by Claude Chabrol, one of Godard's fellow writers and the guy who helped write The Treatment with Francois Truffaut. Now with all of the trivia out of the way, you may feel a lot smarter now, but were you smart enough to realize I never once said French New Wave for the most famous French New Wave film of all time? That was on purpose. And you may now be saying to yourself, what's the French New Wave? And to that, my friends, I'll tell you that we are unfortunately out of time. Perhaps if you like this series, I can go more in depth about these French films and filmmakers so you can be an educated cinephile. But until then, I hope you enjoyed the first episode of Film History for Idiots. Thanks for watching.